A draft resolution at the United Nations Security Council calling for an immediate ceasefire in Gaza was vetoed by the United States on Tuesday.
Those against?
It was the third such veto since the start of the Israel-Hamas war.
Abstentions?
Britain abstained while the 13 other council members all voted in favor of the drafted text.
Proceeding with a vote today was wishful and irresponsible.
U.S. Ambassador to the UN Linda Thomas-Greenfield told the 15-member body that the draft resolution could jeopardize ongoing ceasefire talks between the U.S., Egypt, Israel, and Qatar.
We believe that the resolution on the table right now would, in fact, negatively impact those negotiations. Demanding an immediate, unconditional ceasefire without an agreement requiring Hamas to release the hostages will not bring about a durable peace. Instead, it could extend the fighting between Hamas and Israel.
According to text seen by Reuters, the U.S. has proposed a rival draft resolution calling for a temporary ceasefire, quote, as soon as practicable, and on the condition that all hostages are released. The blocked draft resolution, which was drawn up by Algeria, did not link a ceasefire to the release of hostages. Here's Algeria's UN ambassador.
Voting against it implies an endorsement of the brutal violence.
Israel's UN ambassador said the word ceasefire was being mentioned as if it was, quote, a magical solution.
What exactly will this silver bullet ceasefire achieve? A ceasefire achieves one thing and one thing only: the survival of Hamas.
Palestine's UN ambassador said blocking the Algerian drafted resolution would mean more horrors in a war that health authorities in Gaza say has killed nearly 29,000 Palestinians.
The message given today to Israel with this veto is that it can continue to get away with murder.
Outside the UN headquarters in New York, protesters called on the U.S. to back the resolution. Washington traditionally shields Israel from UN action and has been averse to the word ceasefire in any resolution. But the draft resolution it proposed could signal a shift, as the U.S. text echoes language that President Joe Biden said he used last week in extensive talks with Israel Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, in which he pushed for a temporary ceasefire.
Those against? Abstentions?
Madam President, we thank you. The message given today to Israel with this veto is that it can continue to get away with murder. Israel cannot and should not and will not get away with it. We will not allow it. This veto does not absolve Israel of its obligations, nor of those who shield it. Not here in the Security Council, not in the ICJ, and not anywhere. Even if the Security Council continues to shirk its responsibilities, to be obstructed by the veto of a permanent member over and over, the other organs of the international system are upholding their responsibilities. And one day or another, Palestinian children will not be viewed as a demography threat, but as children with a right to life and to fulfill their hopes and dreams.
Thank you, Madam President. Since October 7th, you truly want a ceasefire? Well, Israel also wants a ceasefire. Your children are not the ones that are falling in battle against bloodthirsty terrorists. They are ours. If Hamas survives, it will be our children that Hamas will murder in cold blood again. Israel seeks a ceasefire, but there is only one formula that we are willing to accept. All of our hostages must be released, and Hamas must turn themselves in. Colleagues, the Algerian resolution not only empowers jihadists by calling for a ceasefire, it also fails, again, to condemn Hamas for their heinous crimes.
Proceeding with a vote today was wishful and irresponsible. And so while we cannot support a resolution that would put sensitive negotiations in jeopardy, we look forward to engaging on a text that we believe will address so many of the concerns we all share, a text that can and should be adopted by the Council so that we can have a temporary ceasefire as soon as practicable based on the formula of all hostages being released. This temporary ceasefire is critical to getting aid into the hands of Palestinian civilians who desperately need it.
We welcome the efforts of our Algerian colleagues on this resolution, and we regret that some of our proposals were not taken on board. Simply calling for a ceasefire, as this resolution does, will not make it happen. Indeed, as it could endanger the hostage negotiations, it could actually make a ceasefire less likely. The way to stop the fighting and potentially stop it from restarting is to begin with a pause to get hostages out and aid in. That is what we are calling for.
Thank you, Madam President.
Good afternoon, everyone. You just heard me make the case for a resolution that I believe all of us can agree to. In fact, the points in the proposed resolution have all been articulated by the other 14 members of this council. These were not just U.S. ideas. They were all of our ideas that I have heard nearly every member of this council discuss both privately and publicly. Ideas that would not put sensitive negotiations in jeopardy, that could lay the foundation for sustainable peace. And yet, we were forced into a vote that did not reflect that consensus. You might ask why, and I'll leave that to you to opine on. Perhaps some on the council did not actually want a resolution to pass. Because if they did, today's vote would not have happened. Over the last several weeks, I communicated the United States' concerns publicly and privately. We submitted numerous rounds of edits. We implored our colleagues not to rush toward failure. And so, having put forward an alternative path, we intend to take it. The draft we presented is a forward-leaning resolution, and it is one that we intend to work on in good faith with other council members to ensure it gets over the finish line. That kind of process was disappointingly absent from negotiations on the text we just voted on. All to say, we're not giving up. We're eager to continue working with the council on this proposal, one that would see a temporary ceasefire as soon as practicable, based on the formula of all hostages being released, and one that would get aid into the hands of those Palestinians who so desperately need it. All told, we intend to do this the right way so that we can create the right conditions for a safer, more peaceful future. And we will continue to actively engage in the hard work of direct diplomacy on the ground until we reach a final solution.
Safe zone in Gaza if the hostages are not released by Ramadan. Do you really
Made it clear in my statement today, the President has made it clear, the Secretary has made it clear that no attacks on Rafah should take place given current circumstances, and we will keep pressing that. We know, we've heard what Israel has said. They have not gone in to attack Rafah, and we will keep engaging and urging and pushing in that direction to ensure that that does not happen.
What about conditioning military support?
I can't give you advance information on what we're saying to the Israelis related to that issue, but I can be clear that we are pressing the Israelis urgently every single day.
Do you think that your draft resolution, if adopted, would prevent Israel from attacking?
I've been clear from the very beginning that we are working around the clock on the ground to get humanitarian pauses that will allow for the hostages to be released and for assistance to get in. And that happened in November, and we got close to, 100 hostages out was the final number, and we got needed humanitarian assistance in. And we're continuing to work on this. This is not a change. It is not it reflects what we've been doing all along. It hasn't changed what we've been doing.
Israel is now threatening to attack Rafah, the last supposedly.
There were a number of other issues with that resolution. It did call for a condemnation of Hamas. It did not recognize Israel's right to self-defense, which is a right that Israel has. And there were other issues with that particular resolution. Since that time, we still have not gotten condemnation of Hamas, despite the fact that I think it is, every council member, almost every council member will say that in their statements. We think it should be reflected in a resolution, even a humanitarian resolution. And let me just say, every life matters. And so it is important that we find a solution that will stop the killing and deaths and suffering of the Palestinian people. And that's why we're on the ground 24/7. No one else is putting their people out there. No one else is putting skin and boots on the ground to find a solution to this situation. And we'll keep working on that every single day.
And the rest of the international community, almost 30,000 Palestinians are dead.
Yes, but they also call for an immediate ceasefire, which would give Hamas the cover of not releasing the hostage. Part of the ceasefire that we're working on requires that they do exactly that, and this resolution did not make that connection. And it was our concern that it would send the wrong message to Hamas, that this resolution, which actually gives them something that they have asked for without requiring them to do something in return, would have meant that the fighting would have continued. Because without the hostage releases, we know that the fighting is going to continue.